Is Washington raising the white flag? A secret deal with Iran has officially kicked off, and it is definitely not the total victory you were promised. While you were sleeping, the rules of the game changed, and American assets are now the bargaining chip. But the betrayal doesn't stop there. The Kremlin has just locked onto a new target in the frozen north, and the first strike zones are already being mapped out. Is a massive Arctic escalation inevitable? From falling approval ratings to a world on the brink, we are breaking down the global chaos right now. Don't look away.
Welcome to the theater of the absurd, where art of the deal meets total disaster. You were promised a knockout blow, a masterclass in diplomacy, and a complete dismantling of the Iranian threat. Instead, what did we get? It looks like Washington just walked into a dark room and handed over the keys to the safe. Let's look at the facts before the PR machine spins this into a victory parade. The negotiations in Pakistan have officially kicked off, but the smell of desperation is already hanging in the air. Donald Trump's grand ultimatum was supposed to be simple. No nuclear weapons. Period. Sounds tough, right? It's the kind of soundbite that looks great on a campaign poster, but while the rhetoric is loud, the actions are whispering a very different story. Behind the scenes, the US has just authorized the unfreezing of massive Iranian assets held in Qatar and other international banks. Let's call it what it is. A multi-billion-dollar bribe just to get Tehran to sit at the table. In Tehran, they aren't calling this a negotiation. They're calling it a test of American willpower. And so far, Washington is failing that test with flying colors. The irony here is thick enough to choke on. For years, the world was told that Iran was on the brink of collapse under the weight of maximum pressure. Now, we're seeing a sudden rush to play nice. The US is trading cold hard cash for what exactly? Promises? We've seen how much Iranian promises are worth. Experts are already warning that Iran is no longer 10 years away from a bomb, or even 5. We are looking at a window of 6 months to a year. The deal doesn't even mention on-site inspections. It's a ghost agreement where the US pays for the privilege of being lied to. And then there's the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most dangerous choke point. Trump claims it will be reopened soon, with or without Iran's permission. But here's the reality check. Tehran has turned the strait into a literal minefield. The punchline? They've planted so many naval mines that they can't even find them all to clear the path. The tool of blackmail has become a self-inflicted trap. Iran wants the shipping lanes open to fix their dying economy, but they've literally locked the door and lost the key. Now, Washington is expected to help clean up the mess while footing the bill. It's a classic bait and switch. You're told the US is leading, but it feels more like we're following. While the administration talks about peace, the reality is a desperate scramble to prevent a nuclear breakout that they should have seen coming years ago. Is this the toughness we were promised? Or just a strategic retreat wrapped in a fancy flag? If this is winning, I'd hate to see what losing looks like. Tehran is laughing, the assets are flowing, and the nuclear clock is still ticking. Washington didn't just bring a knife to a gunfight, they brought a checkbook to a robbery. If you thought the diplomatic mess in Washington was a circus, wait until you see the situation in Tehran and Moscow. It's a literal freak show of power. Let's start with the man who's supposed to be steering the Iranian ship. According to multiple intelligence leaks and reports from Reuters, the new leader of Iran, Mojtaba Khamenei, isn't just lying low. He's physically shattered. We're talking about a man who reportedly lost a limb and suffered severe facial disfigurement during a strike on his residence. Imagine that. The strongman of the Islamic Republic is currently conducting high-stakes nuclear negotiations via audio conferences because his face is too unrecognizable for a camera. He hasn't been seen in a photo or video since March. This isn't just a medical emergency, it's a massive power vacuum. While Washington prepares to sign checks, they're effectively negotiating with a ghost. The official line from Tehran? Everything is fine. But when you have to hide your leader behind a curtain like the Wizard of Oz, you know the regime is one heartbeat away from total chaos. But don't worry, the Kremlin is here to distract you with its own brand of lunacy. When you're losing a war in Ukraine and your domestic approval is circling the drain, what do? You invent a new enemy, of course. And this time, Moscow has picked Norway. Yes, you heard that right. The peaceful Nordic land of fjords and electric cars is now, according to Russian state media, a terrorist hub. The Kremlin's propaganda machine is working overtime, claiming that Norway and Ukraine are plotting sabotage against Russian ships in the Barents Sea. TASS is pumping out stories about threats to the Murmansk fleet as if a Viking invasion is imminent. Let's look at the reality check. The UK and Norway are increasing their military presence in the north, but for one very specific reason: to stop Russian submarines from cutting the underwater cables that keep the global internet and energy grids running. Moscow is playing a classic game of accuse them of what you are doing. They are the ones lurking near critical infrastructure, yet they scream about Norwegian aggression. It's a desperate attempt to keep the Russian public in a state of constant fear. When the special military operation fails to deliver a quick victory, you need a new monster under the bed to justify more spending, more mobilization, and more repression. Whether it's a disfigured leader in Tehran or a manufactured war with Norway, the message is clear. These regimes are terrified of the truth, so they build walls of lies instead. While the Kremlin's talking heads are busy inventing Norwegian terrorists, the reality on the ground is much more sinister and much closer to home. If you thought Russia was looking for an exit ramp from this war, think again. Satellite imagery and intelligence reports have just confirmed that Moscow isn't just launching drones. They are building a permanent industrial-scale infrastructure for terror. A massive new launch site for Shahed-style kamikaze drones has been identified in the Orel and Bryansk regions, with some facilities sitting less than 200 kilometers and in some spots just 70 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. We aren't talking about mobile trucks anymore. We're talking about reinforced concrete bunkers, specialized storage hangars, and stationary launch ramps designed to overwhelm air defenses with sheer volume. They've even built dedicated roads for truck-mounted launchers to ensure they can keep the suicide drones flying 24/7. This is the Kremlin's vision for the future, a landscape dotted with drone factories and launch pads, funded by the very people whose lives are falling apart. But here's the kicker. You can build all the bunkers you want, but you can't hide the fact that the Russian people are reaching their breaking point. For the first time since the full-scale invasion began, even the Kremlin's own state-run pollsters, VTSIOM, are forced to admit that the fortress Putin is cracking. As of April 2026, Putin's approval rating has plummeted to 67.8%, its lowest level since before the tanks first rolled across the border. And that's the official number. When you look at the trust rating, where people actually have to name a leader they believe in, the number has collapsed to a staggering 29.5%. Why the sudden change of heart? It turns out that patriotism loses its flavor when you can't access the internet, your VPN is blocked, and your banking apps stop working because the government's censorship machine accidentally nuked the national payment system. The Russian public is suffering from a massive case of war fatigue mixed with economic reality. Taxes are up, prices are soaring, and the war isn't just on the evening news anymore. It's in their wallets and their phones. Even the loyalists are starting to notice that the emperor has no clothes and no high-speed internet. The Kremlin is building bases to attack its neighbors, but it's losing the battle for the hearts and minds of its own people. When the king can't even keep the telegram channels running, how long before the subjects decide they've had enough of the circus? If you thought the Kremlin's problems were limited to the snowy north or the drone-filled border, think again. The Russian world is shrinking, and it's happening in the most unlikely places. Let's talk about Bali, the ultimate escape for thousands of Russians fleeing mobilization and economic decay. For years, they built their own little Moscow in Ubud, complete with their own businesses, social circles, and a blatant disregard for local laws. Well, the party is over. The governor of Bali has officially pulled the plug on these ethnic enclaves. He didn't just issue a warning, he ordered the total liquidation of the so-called Russian and Ukrainian villages. No more exclusive zones, no more illegal business operations, and no more pretending that an Indonesian island is a province of the Russian Federation. The message is loud and clear. If you want to stay in paradise, you play by the rules. If not, there's a plane waiting to take you back to the reality you tried to escape. Hundreds have already been deported, and the Indonesian government is showing zero tolerance for those who think they are above the law. And speaking of people who think they are above the law, let's check in on Viktor Orban. The strongman of Hungary is facing his own nightmare. On April 12, 2026, Hungarians are heading to the polls, and for the first time in 16 years, Orban's grip on power is actually slipping. His challenger, Peter Magyar, is leading in the polls with a simple message: enough. The streets of Budapest are echoing with slogans from 1956, Russians go home, reminding Orban that his cozy relationship with Putin is a toxic asset, not a political strength. Hungary is at a crossroads, and the illiberal democracy that Orban built is starting to look like a house of cards. But the ultimate sign of a system in decay comes from the top of the Russian Orthodox Church. Patriarch Kirill, the man who provides the spiritual justification for the war, seems to have lost his place in time, literally. During a major Maundy Thursday service on April 9th, he spent 5 minutes preaching about Christmas and the baptism of Christ, which happened in January. It took a handler holding up an open book to snap him back to reality. The church tried to scrub the video, but the internet never forgets. When your moral compass is broken and your memory is failing, what's left of the holy mission? From the beaches of Bali to the cathedrals of Moscow, the facade of strength is crumbling. Leaders are confused, allies are turning, and the safe havens are disappearing. While NASA is looking at the stars with the success of Artemis II, the Kremlin and its cronies are stuck in a past that is rapidly fading. The world is moving on, and it's leaving them behind.